April 14th, 2020. I'm Drutter, and today's day 30 of my lockdown diary. And yeah, I'm just finishing 1 month here at the house. I've left the property only a few times. I'm here in a small BC town, just a few hours drive inland from Vancouver on the Pacific coast. And it's going okay. I'm feeling all right so far. I've been vlogging almost every day about my experiences and about headlines and some data that I follow, and I'll be doing that again today. Yeah, I could go on, I think, if I had to. I don't want to. I don't like this. I feel restricted, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. I feel like this is not sustainable. But I don't feel a sudden pressure. I don't feel a sudden crisis in that way personally, because I have always felt unfree. I've always felt restrained. I've always felt like I'm in prison in Canada. And it's just maybe because I'm more aware than the average person of what actually is going on here in Canada and the world, or maybe I'm more sensitive to certain things or something, but for a long time I've felt unfree. I've felt like this isn't right. This isn't sustainable. We have to break out. And so now I think a lot of other people are feeling that too. Suddenly they're feeling, I'm not free. This is not right. This is not a free market. I'm not allowed to do what I want. My charter rights of freedoms are been removed. I am not as free as I was, and I'm feeling that, right? I think that's what a lot of people are going through. They're suddenly feeling restricted to their properties, or restricted to where they can go, how they can act, who they can talk to and interact with, what they can buy and sell. Everything is shrinking. Our world is getting smaller, and our options are getting smaller. I have felt that for a long time. Now I think the general public is starting to feel that. And people are suffering. It's not good. It's not good. I can take it, right? Because I have dealt with this for a decade or longer in my life. I went through this in 2007. 2008. I went through this when very few people were going through it. I went through it kind of alone. Everyone now is going through this together, and they're saying we can make it together and stuff. And yes, that's true. That's great that we have each other, but a lot of us went through this years ago and realized that there is no help there for you. There is no society really there for you. Even your friends are not really there for you. Sometimes even your family members aren't even there for you. It's really up to you, and only you, right? They say that you're born and you die alone. That's kind of a sad thought, but eventually, even if people are gathered around your bed when you slowly slip away, at some point, from your perspective, they're not there anymore, and it's just you, and you will have to make peace with yourself at some point. If you're not going to do it now, you will at some point, unless of course you meet a very sudden, unexpected end, I suppose. So maybe that's what you're hoping for. Not sure, but I think a lot of people aren't. They probably don't also realize that they are on their own, really. A lot of people feel there's a safety net, or there's some kind of guarantee, or if they fall ill or die or something happens, then they can say, hey, that's not right. No, there's nothing and no one to complain to. This really is all we've got, is our one chance in our life, as far as we know, anyway. It does matter what happens to us. It does matter what's going on here. We're locked down as a nation, as a world. It does matter. A lot of people are suffering, and people are even dying from this. So we have to weigh the pros and cons. I don't think that discussion has really been made, what are the pros and cons of this? We've just been sold only on the pros, we got to do this to save the healthcare system, all this kind of stuff, bring down the curve, all those memes that we've learned long ago. But what's the other side of that equation? What are the downsides? Who is suffering right now? How can the economy ever come back from this is another question, right? We have to find out when this is peaking, when these cases and when these deaths especially are peaking, and when it's coming down the other side. Because to me that's when, that's important. It's important to know when the deaths have peaked. And have we peaked already? Regarding that, ever increasingly popular topic right now, an article on CNN today asks, who is really in charge? Who holds the switch to reopening the economy? And paraphrasing the article, they say, A dial is probably a better metaphor than a switch, and Trump doesn't hold either. He can ease social distancing or mandate mask wearing, but it's mayors and governors who can dial open business. In fact, American citizens are the ultimate authority, yes, on reopening. Consumers make up 70% of the economy, and that's a good thing. And nothing will bring it back if the buyers don't believe it. A poll on our site found just over half would be uncomfortable returning to their regular routines if social distancing were lifted next week. Some random economist notes that the President's Council does not have a single economist or public health expert and warns of a private lockdown replacing the government-mandated one if the economy's reopened without a credible plan. Consumers hold the key, but leadership matters more than ever. Citizens need to know that there's a national plan for their health and prosperity, that they are safe from the virus, and that there is adequate testing to detect it, contact tracing, a vaccine in the works, etc. If people don't believe they are safe, they won't spend. There's a lot of things wrong with that article. I mean, I'm paraphrasing it obviously and cutting out some of the fluff in it, but yeah. In other words, economy will return to health once people feel confident about spending their saved up currency, and it's up to the government and media to convince them that that's safe. But if currency is really what makes an economy healthy, then why not just create more from thin air? Actually, isn't that what they're already doing? Why wait for consumers to give up their savings? Is it really plastic rectangles, steel discs, and digital nothingness that the economy really needs to be healthy again? Or is it goods and services? Maybe it's stuff we need more of, not currency. Maybe we need to get back to growing food, making clothing, building houses, caring for our health, and other things of real value. No amount of dollars in the world will put food into mouths, especially when those dollars are backed by nothing and increasingly hyperinflated away. When I look around, it's stuff that's missing. Empty shelves, long lines, rising prices, closed shops. Yes, it's stuff we need, not more useless currency. And yet they created another 5 trillion of it last week. We need to get back to growing, making, and distributing stuff, not quadrillions in fiat nothingness. CNN claims the public will remain in lockdown voluntarily if government ends the lockdown too early or doesn't dial things open slowly. But my experience is that a lot of people are ready to talk about ending the lockdown ASAP, even now, not to stay locked down well beyond the call to do so. CNN cites an internal poll as justification, but doesn't provide details or even a link to the poll. So, to answer their title question, who is really in charge? It appears that they're saying that they are. After all, they claim the public's too afraid to let go of their valuable currency, which means the economy can't start back up again because it needs that currency so badly. And that it's up to leadership, including the fourth branch, the mainstream media, to convince them otherwise. Funny that CNN begins the article by insisting it's the people who hold the power right now. That is, of course, how it should be, and how it will be, hopefully within our lifetimes. As I said in day 28, time to plan the end of lockdown, my own belief on timing is to start right after the peak of deaths. I've been following deaths figures primarily, as they are the lagging and most reliable indicator. For weeks, we'd been on a perfect exponential curve toward 1 million deaths by the end of this month, but over the past few days, luckily, thankfully, it appears to be finally decelerating slightly. And today's numbers will be telling, so let's get right into that. Looking over the figures from the end of day today, it looks like a lot of nations are doing better than other nations. In fact, if we look at the 4 lowest nations, the nations with the lowest levels of infections and deaths, it appears to be the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These are supposedly the developing economies, the economies with the limited healthcare services in the world. So it's interesting to note that they are doing the best. In fact, China regularly only shows 0 to 1 or maybe 2 deaths per day, while there are now over 2,000 and climbing rapidly in the US, and many other countries have hundreds and hundreds of deaths per day. So it really makes you wonder what China's doing differently. And they did end their lockdowns actually recently, so it's not that they are locked down that's doing it, there's something else, or those numbers are not right. If you look at the US, they had their worst day ever again today. By far the most deaths and cases of anywhere in the world. Supposedly the best economy and the best healthcare system in the world, but they are doing the worst with this virus. Even though they had more time than many other countries to prepare for it because it didn't hit them first. You're 40 times more likely to die from this in the US than China. And that's actually rising fast. It doesn't really make sense. I don't understand why the BRIC numbers are so low. Is it artificially low? Or are the US numbers artificially high? Maybe both. As for Canada, we're adding deaths fairly rapidly now, coming up on our curve. And these next week or two may be the worst for us. And Trudeau says that starting in maybe 2 months, maybe, we will talk about ending the lockdown, and only very slowly, and that there will remain many changes to society. So I don't like his stance on that at all. And if you look at global deaths now, we can see it was one of the worst days yet today, but that curve, that exponential curve starting March 10th or 14th or so, here you can see really starting to pick up on this chart. You can see it picking up, and then starting to reach a peak in early April, maybe a week into April, somewhere in that first week, there does seem to be an inflection point where that exponential growth changed, and it's now either dropping or leveling off anyway, globally around the world, including all those deaths in the US. So have we peaked? We don't know yet for sure. This looks like things have changed. And if you look at cases, I don't have that up on the screen right now, but if you go look at cases, that's infections, that did seem to peak even a week earlier than deaths. It seemed to peak end of March, and it's the beginning of April that the deaths are peaking, so about a week later. And that is to be expected because deaths lag behind infections about that amount of time. So this does look like, yes, we are peaking. It's pretty hard to say at this moment. Something has changed in the past week on the deaths chart. And if we don't see an acceleration tomorrow and the next day to deaths beyond 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 per day, again, then that exponential peak, that exponential rate has been broken. And we will start looking at the curve now, looking at total deaths. That number, see on the right of the graph, it looks like it's wavering, not sure. It's better to look at exponential. And here on exponential, you can see, yes, that curve is turning down. It's not going to continue up and hit that 1 million line at the end of the month like it was going to if it continued that same trajectory that it had been on for weeks. Luckily, we are making a difference. And yes, I think we have peaked for deaths. That number, that calculation will be more obvious in hindsight. But to me, yes, it does look like deaths have peaked. And yes, that means we now need to begin talking about or planning and put into effect the end of the lockdown. There needs to be changes made now. There needs to be changes made over the next week, 2 weeks, to gradually get us back to how things were, or some semblance of that, in a reasonable amount of time. And I will be following that on this channel because I don't think that that is the plan. I think that is my plan. And I think that is what I can't say recommend, but what I believe is right. And everyone can make up their own decisions when and how the lockdown will be ended. Some people haven't been obeying the lockdown at all. I only went into lockdown myself. I went in before it actually was made official because I did it for my own personal reasons, for my family. And that's why I will leave lockdown as well, is based on decisions for my family, not based on what I hear on the radio, on cbc.ca, and so forth. So yes, I do think that we have peaked. Those global death numbers do seem to be evening off now. The acceleration is easing, so that is great news. And we can now start to get ready to come back out of lockdown and ease all these restrictions as soon as possible. And the last thing is related that I want to talk about is Bank of Canada is now urging retailers to accept cash, especially for basics like food, to reduce any potential barriers for Canadians that are already having difficulty making the purchases that they need. So that makes sense. I have myself run into problems. I am a cash person. I pay with cash almost exclusively. And I don't even really have other options. So for me, it's important that cash option continues. Not just for me practically, but also philosophically. I believe that is important to me. And they go on here to say no more germs on plastic notes than on plastic cards or devices or any other surface. So they're saying that plastic notes, people are saying, oh, money, currency, it's so dirty. Well, it is dirty, but it's not much more dirty than anything else. And they also point out that now that they're plastic, which is gross, I don't like plastic notes, but they say now that they're plastic, they can be washed under warm water and soap, and that is true. It's perhaps the only advantage that plastic notes do have that they implemented in the past few years. You can wash them. So, that will kill the virus. At lukewarm to fairly warm water and soap, just simple soap, deactivates the virus. So that will do it if people are worried about their currency. And retailers are saying that they prefer tap or hover methods of payment, but understand that some Canadians, including the disabled and elderly, often only use cash for payment. So to go now to a cashless society would be too dramatic. Bank of Canada is saying it's too soon. We can't go fully cashless, at least not right now. I've been fighting against the cashless society for more than 10 years, non-stop. It's one of my lines in the sand, one of my most important issues, and I won't cross it. So as they prepare to make cash illegal, my ability to buy food becomes threatened, and I don't intend to acquiesce. And I hope other people will stand with me, because if we all did, it would be impossible for them to do it, right? If 100% of people said, forget it, they wouldn't even think about it. If it's 50-50, that's when they pour on the propaganda and trying to change those numbers to get even more people to agree with them. And now we're at that point where very few people are even standing up and saying it matters. And it does matter. So will you stand with me? I'm not going to acquiesce. Are you? Or have you already? Ideally, even fiat notes aren't the best potential currency, right? But one step at a time, let's get that right to hold and use cash back again, which they're already trying to take away. So let's keep that and then advocate for sound money or even a precious metals standard, right? That would be wonderful. But let's not lose that cash option. If we let them take away cash and go to a fully tracked digital payment methods only as the only option, that's it. We won't ever get cash back. So I'm, in a way, thankful to the Bank of Canada because they're siding with me against the government and against retailers, at least for now. But why only a recommendation? Why are they only recommending that retailers allow cash payments? Why aren't they saying it's law? Is cash no longer legal tender? Interesting. I'll have to keep an eye on that issue and the others. And I thank you for joining me. Talk to you again tomorrow for day 31. And stay well.